Welcome to the Purposely Aligned Entrepreneur Podcast presented by Boss Girl Creative. This is episode number 432. Today I'm talking about qualities of a successful entrepreneur. Now let's dive in. Have you already found business success but feel lonely at the top? Or do you feel like you're at a place in your business where others just don't get it? Or maybe you feel like you have to make yourself smaller in order for others to not feel less than. Or maybe just a little bit of all three? But with all that said, there is good news because I've been there and I see you, sister. I'm Taylor Bradford, the torchbearer of this podcast and sisterhood, and I'm here to lead and inspire you to stay purposely aligned in the success you have found and provide you with support, guidance, and a sisterhood to keep going. Because I do get it. Your business journey isn't meant to be traveled alone. So grab a notebook, your favorite pen, and a bevy, and let's dive into this together with this latest podcast episode. Welcome to the Purposely Aligned Entrepreneur Podcast presented by Boss Girl Creative and me. Hello, welcome to episode number 432. I am your host, Taylor Bradford. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today I'm talking about the qualities of a successful entrepreneur and what those qualities are and why those qualities matter. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of this week's episode, let's find out what's been going on with social media. And let's start with this week's social media headlines. Social media headline number 1, Meta announces new ad tools for the holidays. Some new ad considerations from Meta for your holiday pushes. Social media headline number 2, TikTok launches in-stream shops to all U.S. retailers in its latest e-commerce push. TikTok is once again ramping up its push on in-stream shopping. Social media headline number 3, Instagram adds following filter in the Reels tab. Now you can hone your Reels to only post from the accounts that you follow. And the last social media headline for the week, Elon Musk says X users are posting fewer posts per day than people had been tweeting. Musk says users are posting around 200 million X updates per day, which is down from Twitter's 500 million tweets per day stat. And that wraps up this week's social media headlines. All right, let's get into the qualities of a successful entrepreneur and why these qualities matter and all of the things related to this topic. So I'm sitting here with a heating pad on. I have done something to my neck. I'm not 100% certain. I just know getting older is really not that fun when things go sideways with your body. And here we are. I did something on Friday of last week and it is now Tuesday and I've kind of been on the miserable front for the last few days trying to figure out what in the world did I actually do. I honestly don't know. So that really has nothing to do other than that's a life update. Life update, bing, 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 bing. So enough of that. Let's get into chatting about the successful qualities. What are they? How many are there? I have determined there are at least 6. There may be more than these, but these are the ones that I'm going to focus on and chat about because I feel in my own journeys, these qualities have what has distinguished me from my competitors, from other entrepreneurs. And I know that you can dig deep down and work on these qualities. So if you don't have one of these qualities right now, never fear. You can actually work on these qualities. You can develop them. You can get better at them. And these ultimately make up successful entrepreneurs. All right. Quality number 1 is going to be having courage. So why should you have courage, or why is courage a successful quality of an entrepreneur? Well, having courage means you are willing to try new things. You are willing to think outside of the box. You are willing to continue to ask questions because you know there is more. And you're willing to ask yourself this: what definitely will not happen if you don't try? Well, that's simple enough. Nothing. Nothing will happen if you don't try. That will definitely happen for you. Nothing. And you've got to be willing to try. That's what makes you an entrepreneur. That's what propels you into being a successful entrepreneur, because you have courage. You are willing to miss out on the thing. You are willing to overcome fear of not getting the thing because you are willing to try. So let's put a real life example here. With Sugar Creek, I had no clue what I was doing when I started, just like every entrepreneur. I was like, I'm going to do baby showers and tea parties, and this is going to be the best thing since sliced bread. I've got all of these rental items already that I inherited from my mom, and we're going to do this. I didn't have a business plan, but I had courage to try. And what I realized early on was that really wasn't my market, but I didn't know that wasn't going to be my market until I actually tried. And I had the courage to try and start somewhere. You do have to start somewhere. And you will be fine-tuning as you go, as you realize what your core values are, what your why is. Like, why are you even doing this? I was like, oh, I've got these rentals. This would be a good side hustle. Back when I started, I was still working full-time. I continued to work full-time. Heck, I still work full-time doing our roofing company and everything else that I do. Sugar Creek is now on its own. It stands on its own 2 feet. But for the longest time, I didn't know I could get it to stand on its own 2 feet. I knew I had it in me, and I had the courage to try. I had the courage to start. And I think that that's so incredibly important and is basically what has propelled me forward, because I had the courage. So if you haven't found courage yet, I want you to find courage. I want you to ask yourself, what definitely won't happen if you don't try? I want you to overcome that. Quality number 2, curiosity. I got this in spades. It's how I landed in the world of petroleum land manning. It's how I just am where I am. And you've got to have curiosity as an entrepreneur. That's really what sets you apart. You have to have such a deep curiosity of things and learning. I am a sponge when it comes to learning, and I will seek and seek and seek. Sometimes there's squirrel moments, but I always learn something even out of those squirrel moments. So I have a deep curiosity. I am like like dog on a bone when I am trying to learn something. And I ask a lot of questions, especially when I'm trying to figure something out. I want to know how things work. I want to know why we got to here. I want to know how to get better. I really feel like I have an open mind. I love a challenge, and I'm constantly seeking education. If you lack any of those, again, you can latch on and bring them in and become curious. You have to become curious if you're going to be an entrepreneur, especially if you're going to be an entrepreneur long term. Curiosity is a trait, is a quality of a successful entrepreneur. Like I mentioned, it's how I got into oil and gas. I was like, what are these people doing that is allowing them to make this kind of money? And so I asked, what do you do for a living? How do I do it? Can you teach me everything you know, and I will trade a service so that I can learn? Because now I'm fascinated. I want to know more. A successful quality of an entrepreneur is being curious. And let me tell you, curiosity never goes away. Once you have it, you will always have it. It's one thing that I love about myself is the fact that I am still this curious. All right. Quality number 3, vision. What's possible? Having a vision. Seeking something bigger than yourself. Having an imagination. Being able to dream. Looking for new possibilities and new opportunities. You've got to have vision. All successful entrepreneurs have vision. Now, vision doesn't always mean it's clear. It just means you know that something bigger is possible. So here's an example. I am trying to figure out when I'm taking the next step for this wedding venue journey. And I have been on the hunt for the right piece of land for going on probably about 2 years. I told myself this was a 2 to 5 year goal. So I've got 3 years left. I'm hoping it comes along sooner than 3 years. I am literally just waiting for the right piece of land. I have gone out, I've driven around, I have found land, I have written owners 3-page letters in my handwriting. I have spoken to these people once they finally got around to picking up the phone and calling me. And I'm still seeking. I'm still seeking this right piece of land. Well, a piece of property that we looked at about 1.5 years ago is back up for sale. The land itself is perfect outside of the fact that there's a lot of flood on it. We have extensive working knowledge of flood property. Do we want more flood property? No, I'm not really in this to do more flood property, but it makes me think like there's got to be, I should be able to find my dream piece of property within where I'm located. But like this one comes back up and I'm like, okay, maybe this is possible. I'm going to have to reach out to FEMA. I'm going to have to ask, do they have any additional updated data that's not sitting on their maps? Because the problem is this particular piece of property is 45 acres. It's 5 minutes from my shop and it's stunning. We walked it the last time it was up for sale. And there used to be a house on the property a long time ago. I'm not sure when it was pulled away from the property, but it was a homestead for somebody at some point. And so I walked this property. It's stunning. The trees are stunning. There's some wide open places, but then like I need it to be heavily treed. This is heavily treed. And there is a running river that runs through it. It's literally perfection outside of the flood stuff. So when FEMA updated their flood maps in 2012, they just put a bunch of squiggly lines on the map. They didn't come out and actually measure a base flood elevation out here, which is a problem because it means I have to do the studying if I want this piece of property and I want to build on this piece of property. The bank's going to require it, and it is just something that I would have to do. Now, it's 45 acres. I don't want to have to study the entire 45 acres. I could send the survey crew out. I could ask for the elevations all across the property. We could do that. But what determines base flood elevation? So the last go around with this particular piece of property, again, this is going back to vision. The last look through, I contacted a surveyor. I said, how do we determine base flood elevation? Oh, we don't do that. Go talk to an engineer. I talked to an engineer and he was like, it's going to cost you $50,000. And I'm like, oh crap, I don't want to spend 50 grand and still not get the right answer, you know? So this go around, when it came back up, you know, again, curiosity, I'm like, okay, there's got to be a way. Like, how do you figure out base flood elevation if you don't have the data? Like, FEMA didn't give you the number. And so FEMA has written this nice lengthy article talking about how to determine base flood elevation if there is no base flood elevation already determined. So I'm reading through this, and they say, you know, there are a lot of agencies that you can reach out to that may have this data that may not appear on the map. And so anyways, I am going to be exploring that because A, I'm curious, and B, I've got a vision. So I'm talking to one of my sales reps this past weekend, and I'm like, you know, this piece of property popped back up. It's 45 acres. He's like, whoa, that's a lot of land. Do you really need that much land? And I'm like, I've always wanted a lot of land, just personally. It's not necessarily for the wedding venue, but it helps if you have more land because it means your neighbors are further away from you. And so he was like, well, that's really great. You know, people could bring out their horses. You could provide all kinds of activities for your clients. And I'm like, well, my clients are going to be luxury clients. I'm not sure that they're going to bring out their horses, but you know, I'm listening to what he's saying, and he starts talking about a horse arena. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about a horse arena. So we are discussing horse arena, and basically in the horsing world, whether you are Western riding or you're English riding, the horse world is not a poor man's sport. It is definitely, you got to have some money in order to be in this particular type of sport. I mean, you got to have a horse. Horses aren't cheap. You got to have a trailer. You've got to have a truck to pull the trailer. And then it just goes from there. And so my salesperson is like, hey, they just built an arena in my neighborhood, which he lives out in the country. And he was like, let me go take you over there to it, because I think you could do that on a larger piece of property and that would give you another revenue stream. So we're like talking back and forth, and he's telling me what this arena charges. And I've got like these wheels are now turning in my head, because I'm like, the venue build is going to be quite expensive, like well over $1 million just to do the build. So I'm like, oh, what if I built an arena first? It's just a metal building with no sides. It's a roof and some columns. Now, there's a lot more to it than that, but I'm like, if my property is big enough and the style that I want to build the venue in is an English manor estate property, well, in England and in estate properties, there are stables, there are arenas. I could actually make this work. I could create an arena that visually fits in to what I want to build for a wedding venue, and it can be on the front piece of a piece of property, and I could start making money before I actually dive into building a wedding venue. So now the circles are turning, the wheels are turning in my brain, and I'm like, I could make additional type of money from one piece of property by doing something like building an arena first. Vision. What's possible? I would never have had a vision for an arena on a wedding venue property without having this conversation. But once the conversation happened, I'm like, oh, so I start talking to other people, my realtor first, and she's like, oh, I can connect you with a lot of horse people. I talked to my good friend, Angie, and she's like, oh, I can connect you with horse people. The charity that I have chosen to support, Charity Foundation, the founders behind the charity are horse people. And I'm like, I suddenly have surrounded myself with horse people. I now have a Western Ranch collection to Sugar Creek. I'm attracting said horse people. This is literally like lining up. This is a vision coming together. Was it completely clear in the very beginning? The venue was. The rest of it wasn't. But now I've got the wheels turning. What's possible? Imagining dreaming, looking for new possibilities and opportunities. That is a quality of a successful entrepreneur. Next one up, creativity. Thinking outside of the box. Making it a habit to create products, services, opportunities, events, strategies that were not there before. And you're not scared to be imperfect. And you have a comfortability with failure because you know life isn't always perfect. Life isn't always roses. But if you don't try, you won't do. So you have a level of being comfortable with failure. I remember when I started blogging, and this is way before online business became a thing. And if you came up with an idea, you would tell your blog friends about it, and it was a 50-50 crapshoot of whether or not it would actually work. But you didn't care. You were willing to try. You're willing to think outside the box and just do. And being creative is a trait, a quality of a successful entrepreneur. How can I make additional revenue opportunities for myself with this one thing? You just do it. You're not scared to be imperfect. You're willing to just do and be creative. All right, next quality up, resilience. Being willing to fail more than other people. Knowing that things aren't always going to be easy, but you keep going anyway. I could say COVID right now. And if you're still an entrepreneur, you were an entrepreneur before COVID and you're still an entrepreneur now, you have the quality of being resilient because you made it on the other side of one of the world's hardest hurdles, especially if you're in the live events world, especially if you were in a business category that created a permanent shutdown for you during the time of COVID. Resilience, being willing to keep going more than other people who choose to give up. And then finally, patience, which is the opposite of the coin of resilience. Patience means you don't expect results overnight. My husband, for the longest time, kept telling me, I'm giving you 5 years for Sugar Creek. I'm giving you 5 years to make it work because you are working hard, but you're not making a whole lot of ROI. And really, that just means money in his eyes. He's definitely motivated by the dollar. Whereas I do like money, but my motivation is deeply rooted in purpose and passion, in helping. That is where my purpose lies. That is where my why values sit. But he is fully driven by the dollar. So he's like, I'm giving you 5 years. 5 years for Sugar Creek, and then I want you to shut it down if it doesn't do what you expect it to do and the ROI is not there. Leading into COVID, 2019 was a fantastic year for Sugar Creek. So let's reverse back to when Sugar Creek started. My rental business started in October of 2014. But I was still on the road until about the summer of 2016. So I was behind the scenes, not really being a part of the day-to-day of the business, except our social media and our website. And then my business partner and I split, and Sugar Creek was born in late March, early April of 2017. So 2017, I didn't even have a full year to get going. And 2018 was my first full year of being intentional and purposeful in the business and what I was doing. In 2019, I tripled my revenue from 2018. I was on a roll. 2020 started and I was on track to 3x my revenue again in 2020. And then March 2020, our world changed. And I was shut down. every live event was shut down. And I was like, oh my gosh. I started this business in October of 2014. Technically, I've already been at this for 5 years, but my 5 years really started at 2017. And here we are 3 years in, and I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do? I had all of this momentum, but I'm not giving up. I don't give up. I don't like the word no. I don't think anybody really likes the word no, but I don't like the word no, and I'm an entrepreneur. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to get through 2020. I built this warehouse. I'm moving in during shutdown. This will give me an opportunity to be intentional with how I set up and lay out my warehouse, what it looks like, how it feels, what the experience is for my future Sugar Creek clients. I get through 2020. 2021 comes around and things are starting to pick up. I am almost back to the revenue that I was making at 2019. In spring 21, I bought my first vintage Chesterfield. I had been on the hunt for one for a really long time. And so it was the first vintage Chesterfield into my collection. I already had a leather piece of furniture in my collection, but it was modern. So now I have this vintage Chesterfield and it starts to rent. And then I get the phone call that turns out to be Yellowstone. I didn't know it was Yellowstone at the time, but they see this leather Chesterfield. They also see this other vintage couch and they're like, we want 2 lounges. I didn't know it was Yellowstone still at the time. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. 2 lounges. The focal point is the leather sofas. And I'm about to head back down to Round Top. Now I have an assistant, by the way. So I hired an assistant at Labor Day 21. My assistant's now been with me for 2 years. And so she's going with me to Round Top for the first time. And I'm like, okay, this one decision in the spring of 21 of buying this leather Chesterfield is game changing for me. Because now I'm speaking to Yellowstone. Still don't know it's Yellowstone, but I'm speaking to Yellowstone. And I'm about to go back down to Round Top. I made a connection with the gentleman I bought the leather Chesterfield from. And so I call him up and said, hey, what are you bringing down? I need some more leather pieces. And so he sends me some photos. I share them with my husband. He's like, yes, just get them all. You just don't know. This is the domino. You don't know what you're going to need. I still didn't know it was Yellowstone. So I buy a majority of what he's got out there. I send my husband down before I even go down there. He brings it back. I get photos of it all. I send it to these people, again, still not knowing it's Yellowstone. And they're like, oh, the client wants it all. And then they told me who the client was. And I'm like, the client wants it all? Yellowstone wants it all? I created 6 lounges for the Yellowstone VIP premiere party for season 5. 6 lounges. Because I made the choice to add something into my collection that no one else had, and then I started to build out the Western Ranch collection. So now I have all this Western Ranch in my collection. I'm attracting this horse world, which is crazy pants, but I love every minute of it. From Yellowstone was Willie Nelson, and now it's Wingstop. And the list is just going to keep going because I finally found what my calling is in the specialty event rental world. And I couldn't be more thrilled. So the whole concept of potentially putting in an arena is kind of like the cherry on top for what it is that I'm doing. Patience. I never expected the results that I've created to happen overnight, but I always had faith in myself. Always. So let's recap the qualities of a successful entrepreneur: having patience, having resilience, being creative, having vision even if it isn't truly clear, being curious, and having courage. What are you lacking? It's time to go out and get it. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And go grab my book if you haven't picked it up yet. It is Pillars and Purpose, How to Build a Business That Works for You. Go to bossgirlcreative.com/pillars book. That's Pillars with an S book, and grab a copy. There's a Kindle version, there's a print version, and it is for newbies all the way up to veterans. I promise you it will be a great tool in your business toolbox. Until next time, I hope you have a great rest of this week. Oh, wait, before I go, thank you truly for your support of my own business journey and this podcast, The Purposely Aligned Entrepreneur. If you know another entrepreneur who is in the same business trenches, who has already found success but might be feeling a bit lonely in their journey, my hope is that you'll share this podcast and this sisterhood with them. Because this, what we do day in and day out, isn't meant to be done alone. Speaking of lonely, if you're ready to squash the business journey loneliness, stop what you're doing right now and join the sisterhood. Visit bossgirlcreative.com/sisterhood. I can't wait to see you in there.